I ended up in this corporate path really never wanting to do it. Maybe I was climbing up the wrong ladder. Basically, as I was marking off the check boxes that this path lays out for me, promotions and money and awards and all those things, and all really good and all things I was enjoying, I realized that the enjoyment of them became shorter and shorter and shorter. I was reflecting on why do I feel that way, and that started this path of, well, am I in the right path, right? Just because I'm maybe quote unquote having success, is this the right path for me? Maybe it's not.
What was the game changer for you in your career? Because you made a pretty substantial stop and pivot. What was that? And what do you, let's just start there, because I think it'd be a great way to have a conversation here.
Yeah. I mean, the pivot was probably an accumulation of like 7 years or 8 years of slowly but surely figuring out that maybe I was climbing up the wrong ladder, leaning on the wrong wall, And so there wasn't a moment in particular. I ended up in this corporate path really never wanting to do it. I don't know that anybody grows up saying, I want to work in corporate, America. I don't know that that's like on the top 10 jobs things in first grade, but I was like really against it. I mean, I seriously was. I really wanted to do something entrepreneurial coming out of college. I watched my dad climb a corporate ladder. So I was very much in admiration of what it takes to do it. And I saw the rewards that can come from doing it, quite frankly, as he turned his life around from it. But that wasn't what I saw myself doing. Yet you end up finding yourself many times in this life doing things that you wouldn't necessarily have predicted. And so I guess as I got into it, what's funny is, just like anything, if you are driven or ambitious and determined, you're going to probably just start running hard wherever you go, right? And that's really what happened for me. I went in that lane. There were goals and external validation metrics to chase, and I'm competitive, and I went for it, and I got sucked into it. And at one point I thought I was never going to leave, working for a company like American Express that does such a good job rewarding even people that have a very entrepreneurial streak or spirit. But yeah, it was kind of 7 years of, all along, and this is not a knock on them, right? I was tolerating this path I was in, tolerating it, and very much realizing I was constantly having to pull myself back from like my natural state of being, the way that I like to operate, a lot of my core, characteristics and traits. I had to constantly be reining in order to fit in to the proper kind of method and track that you needed to do there. So I don't know if I'm directly answering it, but it was a gradual progression.
I think you are. Is there anything that you remember that felt so off? I mean, when you think about holding yourself back, what's an example of something like that? Do you remember anything in particular, or anything stand out to you that was when you were going in and going through the motions, that you were like, this is not why or how I want to do it? Because I think a lot of people feel this. I think a lot of people go through this question. They're driving to work right now. They're listening to this on their way to or from work. They're kind of questioning, is this all I'm meant to do or be?
Right.
And there's some moments they have in their day where they're like, this is not me. This is bullshit. I don't even like this. What am I doing?
Yeah. Well, I'll take one step back, because there was a moment that started to change this trajectory for me that I tell pretty much in every one of these kinds of a conversation I have about my past, which was I did pick up a book in the airport. Not many life-changing moments start with a book. And it's not just the book, but this book that I picked up randomly called Positive Intelligence back in 2012, when it was a #1 New York Times bestseller for 2 years straight, I thought was just going to be another good read as somebody that's kind of sincerely curious about how to maximize, human performance. And it's the neuroscience and positive psychology research of how all of us could be better, how all of us are doing things on a routine basis when we're amidst stress and adversity that are getting in our own way. And I read it, and I recognized it was speaking to me like right into the gut, right? And through two things that had bothered me and afflicted me since I was a young kid, in my earliest memories of life, like Little League baseball time. And I had the audacity to reach out to the author and struck up a friendship with him off of a cold call when he was lecturing at Stanford and running the largest executive coach training company in the world back then called CTI. And that friendship with that author on the back of picking up this book randomly in the airport led to going through his coaching immersions that he did, which, was amazing. And then there was a 7-year period where I got coached by a guy I would have never been able to afford because I was a mentee at that point. And that on the back of his very introspective framework, all of that was helping me see that basically as I was marking off the check boxes that this path lays out for me, which was promotions and money and awards and all of those things, and all really good and all things I was enjoying, I realized that the enjoyment of them became shorter and shorter and shorter. Like the moment, when I first started making money, I think it was a longer tail. But then like to the next bump or to the next promotion or to the next accolade, those moments just became more and more temporary. And then I would immediately descend back down to baseline levels of happiness, fulfillment, significance, and self-worth. And that I started, because of the introspective process I was in, instead of just being heads down tunnel vision like I was just a few years prior, I was reflecting on why. Like, why do I feel that way? And that started this path of deep exploration to your question of, well, am I in the right path, right? Just because I'm maybe quote unquote having success, is this the right path for me? Maybe it's not.
Yeah. It's interesting how similar it sounds when you're climbing the ladder and hitting each of these bogeys and these goals, and each one you need more quicker. It sounds like people that are addicted to drugs often define, a heroin addict says that the first time I ever felt it, I've never felt anything like it again. And I chased that over and over and over again. And I've talked to lots of people that have been addicted over the years and overcome it. And it's amazing how the rat race, if you will, can become the same kind of addiction, where that goal of having the trophy, of winning in the room, and you're only as big as the room you're in. And then all of a sudden you realize you're not that big, and you're like, oh, well, there's a whole nother level, and now I can move my goals. And it really does change that perspective. And it's so interesting to me. One other point I'll make, and I'll let you comment on that. But I too read a book I was a financial advisor, and I was probably like 6 years in, and I was growing every year by 20-30%, and my business was getting good. I was finally starting to make some decent money, and I read a book on the industry, and it was completely different than all my training, completely different. It was all relationship driven. It was how I was as a human. And I was like, I'm changing everything. And so I picked up the phone and called the author and struck up a multi-year mentorship where we built out programs and processes and, developed this great friendship over the years. And I remember actually writing checks for, a huge amount to just get started and thinking, am I doing the right thing? And it turned out to be one of the greatest moments and pivots in my career, because it had me working towards bigger things. It wasn't just about a goal within the company I was in, or the next bogey. Those started to mean less and less to me, whether I was getting the next ribbon or whatever the level up was. It didn't matter. It was, am I aiming for, I have a friend who calls it their North Star. Was I focused on the North Star for my life? And those are really powerful moments. They seem obscure and small, but they are big. You picked up a book in an airport, you read the book, you called the author, you started up a long mentorship, and it's changed your life. And whether it's that one moment or all those moments mixed together, it's still pretty damn powerful.
It is. That's so funny that you have a similar story. And I mean, it's, that's what I mean. It's not one moment, right? I mean, it was a patient perspective building path that gradually has continued to unveil itself. And as time's gone on, I've gotten better about trusting these types of, introspective journeys that sometimes you just stumble into. And, you got to wonder, right back to your faith, where, why do things show up at certain times, and then, you know, do we enough of these times when something randomly pops into our life? Do we jump on it? Do we walk through the door? I think we miss a lot of them, quite frankly. I think we miss a lot of doors that we should walk through. I think we miss investing in relationships. I think it's an X factor that becomes more important in today's day than probably ever in this digital, right, disruption world that we live in, that getting back to some of that old school stuff that you would have done when life was slower, and it was a different time, and you would have just stayed more open-minded and more curious and more deliberate about, you know, people and relationships and experiences. Sometimes those lead you down paths that help you figure it out, because you can't think hard about this stuff. That's the thing. You know, people are always like, I catch a lot of people in transition. We support in our executive community a lot of folks when they're in a state of transition. That's when people tend to look for communities and networks to support them. And the problem is that when we really feel like we need to figure it out is when we're typically going to struggle the hardest. Because when you feel pressure and stress and timelines and all that, and you're like, I'm writing things down and I'm trying to figure this out, I need to figure it out by X date. That's not how the brain works. That's not where vision and creativity and innovation live. They live in white space. They live in pressure-free environments. They live because we dot connect on the words that we hear and see around us just by being in different rooms. You know, to your point, always my main advice to people when you're if you're not feeling fully fulfilled or possibly questioning the lane that you're in, is make sure you spend time, to your point, outside of your day job, just doing things that interest you, just doing things that inspire you, that bring you joy, that feel like you're stretching yourself. Trust those things, invest in them, be patient with them, because a lot of times they will eventually guide you down to the bigger decisions that eventually you would make and feel confident about.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful when you think about slowing down to speed up. You know, it's one of those things I've talked about a lot of times because I'm a sprinter.
Yeah.
And I've lived my life sprinting. And guess what? You miss a lot of opportunities when you're sprinting. It's like speeding on the highway. You know,
That's
you
right.
can't be speeding on the highway and then catch the best exit to go have dinner or lunch if you're just flying down, not paying attention to what's coming up ahead.
Yeah.
But if you slow down, kind of pull up Waze or Google Maps and you take a look and someone's in the car and you have a conversation, you can find some real gems. And
That's
life
right.
is a lot like that. You take these moments and you realize that maybe I'm sprinting too fast. Maybe I need to slow down so I can actually open myself up to think through it. And then to your point on you know, life in transition and how hard it is interesting. It's like what drives you to go to the gym. You know, when someone is not working out and they get out of the shower and they look at themselves and they don't like what they see. And, or maybe one of their kids says something to them and they're like, hey, dad, mom, you know, what are you doing? Are you all right? Like, you know, kids will say the darndest things to you.
Yeah.
And I'm in like some of the best shape of my life right now. My boys still tell me that I'm fat.
Yeah.
So they're 16 and 19 and they're cut and they're ripped. And I love it. I think it's great because we're just busting on each other. But
Yeah.
I still, at the end of the day, you know, there's something that drives you for change. But when you make that decision, it's usually the hardest time to make that decision. And then the first couple workouts are the most painful. They're the ones where you don't even think you can get through it. If you're actually pushing yourself, you're pushing yourself at a point. I started a new workout 12, 15 weeks ago, and I do legs, but I haven't done legs like this in a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, week one was two workouts of legs. By the second workout, I hadn't even gotten healed from the first one. And I was like, how am I going to do 15 weeks of this? Like, I'm never going to make it through. I'm already thinking about how I'm not going to make it. Right.
Yeah.
And instead, week 2 was a little easier. Week 3 was a little easier. I still hated it in week 4 and 5, but I started to recognize what was happening and the return was quicker. The healing was quicker. The breakthroughs were quicker, you know?
Yeah.
So it's so relative to what you're saying. It's such a powerful point that when we're going through those moments, it's when it's the most challenging, but it's also kind of the what we need to maybe see that we need to make that change.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to be patient. You've got to be willing to just stick with things too, you know? I think today's day, the hardest part is that nobody wants to stick with anything because that's the way we're living. We're scrolling, right? And that's how people are living. People are living like they scroll, just to the next thing, to the next shiny object, to the next person, to the next event, to the next day. And there's, this is not shiny anymore. Like sticking with things, going through the long, slow burn that then turns into something that brings you a lot of joy because now it's a lot easier, or it is something that you've decided that you really enjoy doing. That's a big part of, I think, a lot of the figuring it out part as well. Don't just find some things that you think could be majorly impactful. Get around smart people that have done it or helped others do it. Invest in those relationships, invest in yourself, and stick with it, and it might be years, including maybe even decades, but chances are if you stick with it, some good shit's going to happen eventually,
Yeah, you're right. I was at a event this past week. I'm a member of a group called Genius Network and have been for many years. And when you talk about time in, there's a lot of new members, but there's consistently some of the same old members.
Yeah.
But most people run it a couple years and then they get what they want out of it, or maybe they're exponentially enhanced, and then they take a step back because they don't have any time. And when I don't have a lot of time, I stay engaged. I continue to pay to be a part of the group, but I just do what I can. And I've tried in this part of my life to be patient, but I find myself, to your point, in a room full of people that in one afternoon have me thinking in a different way, or helping me see something I hadn't seen about an industry I'd never even knew existed. And these are things that open our brains in ways that we don't often get to because we're impatient, or because we're searching for ROI, or we're even worse, seeking pleasure, right? Like if you're just seeking to feel good, it's not always the way around it. And so surrounded by the right people in the right room and then having a patient outlook on it is some very powerful advice, which, is obviously something that you practice and teach to everybody.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Our whole networking community crew, we are a very diverse ecosystem intentionally. We started at a VP and above kind of membership criteria for leaders. But other than that, we said we want it to be all roles, all industries, all company types, because I personally believe for sure in the power of transferable knowledge. I feel, to your point, we spend so much time and insulated in our own bubbles and silos that over 10, 15 years becomes nothing but echo chambers. And the easiest way to feel like you're starting to become a smarter person in the room is to get out of your damn room. You have to get out of your room more frequently. Get into another room. There's going to be smart people. It's not going to be all literal and immediately applicable. That's on us to do some dot connecting and take the transferable nuggets, then go back into our room. And I promise you, if you do it, people are going to go, those are great ideas and great thoughts. It's not rocket science. It's just get out of the room and get into different rooms, and then go back, and you'll realize, man, there's a magic here. There's a power here. Again, consistency though, sticking with that, believing in that, being curious about it. Long-term kind of growth is kind of a big part, I think, of, to your point, that transfer part.
Yeah, I think about how young people struggle in relationships nowadays, and there's this, that, to your point earlier about immediate gratification and just flicking through the phone. Like, think about dating now.
Yeah,
it's this immediate gratification. It's this, oh, am I attracted to her or him or not? Yeah. And I go back to what you were just saying about getting out of the same old space in the same old room. One of the most powerful things people can do is step outside of their pond or the lake that they're around and go somewhere larger, go somewhere that they share a passion. If you love doing something, go do it. Be around people that love it, and watch how the universe and God work to pull the right people and things around you. We don't need a flip book of hot guys and gals. We could actually move through in a way where we can actually meet people again, but it requires, putting yourself out there, but putting yourself out there in a place that you feel comfortable, something you like doing. and
That's right.
that energy that you have will attract the right people. I think we've lost the art of attraction. We're
Yes.
forcing it so much and telling everyone how great we are that we've
Yeah.
lost the law of attraction, which is be who you are, put out that energy and see what comes back to you.
It's really good points. I totally agree with you, Scott. And I think just we've lost the art of just real, authentic human connection that leads to attraction or synchronicity or synergy or whatever you want to say happens from some of the best, most impactful relationships. But the reason I believe in this stuff so much and then try and cultivate it or get others to think about it more is because the most transformational people in my life are have always been people that were not in the lane or the arena that I was in. They were far from it. And in some ways, you would argue if you looked at it on paper, we should have never been meeting or spending significant time together. They were transformational to my life. I hope they would feel the same because these relationships usually go both ways when we step out of those bubbles. And I just, that's all I can do is say that's been my experience. I've also watched it be their experience and others. How many people can you meet that are not like you or not in that lane that you're in? And can you cultivate those relationships? There's a lot of upside on the back of those.
What's interesting is I know that you've worked with your dad for a good long time now, right? And you have a working relationship with your father. And when you talk about relationships and you talk about investing in each other, talk to me about your relationship with your father. I think that's an interesting dynamic and something that a lot of people admire when they hear that that's something you've done.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's funny because when I get a question like that, I get chills because I realize the privilege that I have of being able to work with him, and that a lot of people would hope that you could do this, right? Either father son or mother daughter or family member, because he's my best friend. I mean, I grew up an only child, and my dad was just one of these amazing dads. And we've always joked about the concept of working together, but when you don't have a family restaurant business, you can struggle to figure that out. And he's been jet setting and I've been kind of moving up and doing my thing. And then finally this idea aligned together where we could kind of bridge a generational divide on this, support ecosystem for leaders that are, in the VP and above phase of their life, essentially. And it's surreal. I mean, we're 2.5 years into it. It's on paper, right? A successful endeavor so far. If he and I, ended this tomorrow, we'd feel proud that we made it work. We got it off the ground. We did the hardest thing to do in bootstrap startup scenarios. But it's also challenging. I mean, it really shows me, quite frankly, just how close we are. Because when you're in literal business co-founder partnership with someone, and it hits the execution phase, which hits like a year or so in beyond that honeymoon visionary phase. You've got to create boundaries. And quite frankly, I fall off of this on occasion, and we get maybe too focused in business mode, probably for where he'd like to be at this phase of his life when he could just be coasting and retiring, quite frankly. But there's something so cool about it, right? Being able to watch each other in our elements, doing something that we feel a lot of meaning and fulfillment deeply behind. And that was the core impetus to why we even did it. This is a story I'm leaving with my son that how could I have told him a story like this? He'll get to kind of see it, watch all the documentation of it, of the videos we've done together and the interviews. And, I hope he finds it inspiring for him and his family for years to come on what a family, can be like, even in a business setting.
Well, it sounds like your dad's doing the most fatherly thing he can do, where he could separate and hang out and chill and maybe guide a different level, but instead he's charging ahead with you, watching you at your peak, being able to stand side by side with you. And I think fatherhood is a lot of sacrifice, and that sacrifice provides us with something that's so much more fulfilling than sitting out and sitting on the sideline. And so that's a powerful representation in itself, just being able to do it. I mean, I also think it's admirable that you love the same things. Sometimes that's I am very proud of my father, proud of my parents. My dad is very blue collar and very unique, and the way I think is very different from my father. And so we have a great relationship, but I also don't come in and tell my dad about the new business that I'm creating. I talk about the Cowboys, and we talk about football, and we have our things, and family and fatherhood. He's phenomenal at that stuff. So, but it is kind of cool when you can build that together. And it's close to home this weekend. I actually brought my son with me to a Genius event, and they had a Genius Youth event that they were doing. And so my 19-year-old son got to see a part of it. And I told the room when the kids weren't there, I said, one of the coolest things about this that the kids don't understand is that we love watching them play. Doesn't matter what they play, baseball, soccer, art. They could be awful singers on a stage, and we love watching them put themselves out there. When you become an adult and your children become adults, it's kind of nice that they get to watch you play.
Yeah.
And when you've been successful at something, and you have a level of passion and love for something, and your network or your group is all people like you, and then they get to see you in that environment, it's like they're coming out to our soccer game, watching us play, and it's duly fulfilling. So just a little aside, but super interesting to what you're doing with your father.
Well, you're hitting on some things that are just kind of so much at the core of everything that, I believe in, which is, basically how we're defining success, as high achievers, as people that want to be the best version. That was the big thing that I got tied up about once I was in my 30s. And I was starting to hit some of the traditional forms of what people think and have told me are success. And then I realized, no, success is a lot broader than the version I've been sold and that I've been chasing. And a big, broad part is it's about our relationships. It's about, like, what did we contribute? What kind of person did we become? It's about these deeper things that at the end of our lives, looking back, we really reflect on. Or we could ask these folks at the end of their lives, what are you reflecting on the most? And they'll tell us what's most important. And how can you define success through that lens now when you're in your peak or in your earlier years? And I think one of the biggest things we can do is, parenting is one of the best privileges and responsibilities we get to do. And, there's nothing that I think any of us could agree on more, which is that, well, we all have different versions of what we hope for our kids. The one thing we all normally agree on is we just hope that they're really happy and really fulfilled and find meaning probably in their life and in their work or their careers. And I think that, to your point, my dad getting to do this with me, supporting me as I'm going down that path that's more about meaning and fulfillment and contributions and all that than it was the traditional path, which he faced, it's just like this massive cherry on top, right? That he's now supporting me here. And I think it's a part of his full circle moment of meaning and fulfillment, because he doesn't have to do it, right? He could just be supportive in the background. He could, and I said, I don't want your money, right? I don't, like, this is the best unconditional love I could possibly draw up, is a dad being in the trenches with me when he doesn't necessarily want to work, And so, man, I pinch myself, and I just hope that everyone just takes, we're not always going to have, like you said, the cohesion in work, but these relationships we have with each other in family and friendships and all of that. What can you do that shows this kind of unconditional stuff? Because I promise you, if you do a lot of that, you are going to feel one hell of a lot of meaning and fulfillment in your life,
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I think it's nice because, like I said, he's getting to see you in your prime. He's also getting to see you not maybe follow some of the parts of his life that he would have changed.
That's right.
If he had different circumstances. And I look at that. There was a moment in my life where I was sitting at the dinner table one time, and I looked across from my dad, and my dad was kind of selling something, and he was telling us about it, and he was talking about his job or something he was doing. And he was so competitive and so rhythmic in his words and saying the right things. And I thought to myself, man, if my dad would have gotten in a sales job at 21 instead of working for a school system, like, life completely changes for him.
Yeah.
but I don't get to be who I am today. So, there's
Yeah.
two parts. It's not about feeling sad or sorry that life was different for somebody. It's being appreciative of
Yeah.
where we're sitting right now, and also being grateful that that groundwork that your father laid of being in that corporate role, of you getting to see that and
Yeah.
then repeating it to some extent, that also helped to reiterate the most important part of your life right now, which is making this adjustment and change so that I can do it side by side with my dad.
Yeah.
And you have one son, or how many children do you have?
Just one son. So yeah,
Okay.
we
You're
started
repeating the
late.
whole, you're
I'm
doing the
repeating
whole
the whole
thing.
only child deal. Yeah. I'm a lot older than my dad was, So but yeah, we're passing this lesson down to him. He's going to have a whole wide spectrum lesson of what you can do if you put your mind to it in this life. And he was one of the impetus. You'd ask me about pivotal moments. Actually, when I took 5 months of paternity leave, which was a brand new policy when Amex just launched it, one of the leading companies to do that kind of a heavy offer for guys in the parenting side. And I took it, and I was a newly minted VP GM, biggest job I'd had at Amex that I'd been basically working towards for the last 5 years. But I took it. And I believed in my leadership through others in my team. So I knew that I think it would be fine. And it was in those quiet times with him that I also recognized that, you recognize your mortality, right? When you're holding, your son, and you recognize how short life is. And especially when I stood there with him for 5 months when he could barely interact, there's just tons of quiet time. And I would take the morning shift. And it was absolutely during that time that I think I started making my mind up that I wanted to do more. And I wanted to let him see that you can do whatever you want to do at any time in your life, under any circumstances, if you feel so passionately inclined to pursue it. That was a lesson I wanted to leave for him. He was a major inspiration for me, even though technically that I should have, opposite, right? Human would tell you, you should now stay more stable and secure because you're now raising a family. So you shouldn't give all that up. That wasn't how I felt. I felt completely the opposite.
Yeah, I think new life, new energy, makes us think in a different way. When I look at youth, I'm reminded of this decisions that I could have made that maybe I didn't. Yeah. And I'm also reminded how quick life goes, because you never think that you're going to be sitting there. I've had this realization lately where, I see a pregnant woman with her husband, and I am like so engaged and so excited for them. And it's mainly my wife and I are now in that empty nest phase. Our boys are older and they're moving through life in a stage where it's not like they're giving you a ton of the love and affection. No one's running to the door when we walk in anymore. Yeah. And you have these flashbacks of how simple life was, yet how complex and challenged I was mentally, and how focused I was at just providing and protecting. Yeah. So much so that I wasn't always present.
Sure.
And not in a bad way, but definitely in an imperfect way, like all parents. But you look at that hindsight of 2020 and you're looking back, and I just see this. And my little brother has 2 little girls now, and they're under the age of 2. And, we go to my parents' house every Sunday and the kids are there. And honestly, that new life gives me new energy. It makes me want to do different things. It makes me want to have more engagement. And it also wants me to share the stories and the things that I remember from that, little things like telling my brother that, hey, it's not easy. Having the second one makes you think. So you had the one. Well, when you have the second one, now you're like, now you feel the first one like brought you to joy. You're in this unbelievable moment. You're like, oh, we became a family together. There's all this love and life. The second one comes and you're like, oh shit, I got to double everything I'm doing. That was miserable. I was so tired. I was tired. My wife was doing 90% of the work. Like, imagine how she feels, not to mention that we have to now go through this journey to get back connected again, because that's not the easiest thing. And you go through this, and I'm telling my brother, he's like, seriously? And I'm like, yeah. It's okay to hold them. And the second one, you feel a little angst. But the reality is they will provide just as much joy. You will love them as much as you did the first one. It will all
Yeah.
come. It just takes a little bit of time. And what you're describing, I think that quiet time probably gave you the energy you needed to make a different decision and to really move in a different direction. And kudos to the company for allowing you to do it, because unfortunately they lost a great worker, but they gained something bigger, right? Life is bigger. You have great memories of your American Express years.
Yeah, I gave it everything I had for 12 years. And, I don't think companies should look at it like that, because quite frankly, at that time, it was time for me to leave. It was time for other people to have the opportunities that I have been having, right? It was done. And that's okay. And that's why companies should still give those benefits, because you got to keep, right? Giving, you got to keep the new life. Has got to keep coming through the funnel. And look, I still have great relationships with all those folks. I mean, I leveraged so much from that experience at Amex, and all the people I got to sell to customer wise, all the people I got to interact with, just the lane of being in financial services with such a prestigious brand. I can't tell you how much I leveraged those resources and tools and experiences in my entrepreneurial phase. I mean, I would not have been able to do this had I not done that. Right. That's the other, a lot of times we're trying early on in our life to figure out paths. And sometimes you have to just go through these stages and go through them longer, and even at later ages, right? I wanted to be an entrepreneur at 24. Well, guess what? I was much more suited at 44. That's the reality. I needed 20 years doing other things, figuring out what I didn't want in order to actually help me get very certain and clear on what I did want. And, that's something I would tell any young, ambitious person in their teens and in their 20s is, try to figure it out. But if you can't, just keep your head down, keep learning, and then keep that white space a moment happening so that you maybe connect the dots in different ways that you can't foresee right now,
Yeah, I've talked about this on this podcast before with other guests. And if you think about the scatter chart or scatter plotted chart of life, right? And you have all these things that are happening. And when they're happening to you, they are so far apart. Sometimes you're like, sometimes you're having a child, you just got your promotion, you take months off to become a person with your family, connected, a father, all those things. And you're like, whoa, I just worked my butt off to get this promotion. And now am I sacrificing it? No, it's the best decision for you. And these charts these decisions are all over the board. But then you look back on life and they're just completely aligned in a linear position. There's barely any space between them. Yeah. But you can't see it in the moment. You can't see in the moment that there's no space. You feel like they're so far apart, and yet they become all aligned to the vision. And you look back and it was all a part of your story. I love that mentality, because it makes everything that's happening to us and around us and with us kind of have purpose, versus the other way where you're like, I'm getting derailed. This is awful. I don't know how I'm going to recover from this. And it's just, it goes from that victim to victor mentality without question.
Yeah. And then it's just, it's like, you really do have to fall in love with the little things, no matter where you're at in a phase of career and life. The other thing I really learned through this whole journey, corporate, entrepreneurial, and, working on myself for so long and working with others now in safe settings for so long, is happiness and fulfillment come through appreciation and fixation on all the little routine things that happen day in, day out. Doesn't matter what you end up doing, whether you stay corporate, whether you go entrepreneurial, whether you stay safe, whether you take risks. Whoever wins in this life is whoever is going to have the more joy, the more fulfilling days, the more appreciation for all the things you do have on a routine basis, and experiencing that with others, right? Because these things go quick. Raising kids goes quick. Parents being healthy and around goes quick. All of these things go quick. That is the part that I really realized, being a high achiever, being so driven, so ambitious, so disciplined, heads down, tunnel vision. I was going to miss this, and I'm still a major work in progress, but thankfully I'm at least completely conscious and aware versus subconscious and on autopilot like I once was. because I was going to miss so much of the stuff that really makes a happy and fulfilling life. And it's never tied to destinations. It's always in the moment, in the journey you're in, you know? And we know this, right? We know this in reflective moments on a calm Sunday over holidays, but like, that's the thing that I invest a lot of time into training myself and others around. But can you slow down life enough, even in the busiest seasons of life, to enjoy the little things that you have? Because if you can do that, you're going to feel very successful.
Yeah, it's really funny to that point. A year or so ago, I went to Italy with a buddy of mine, and we were walking to church and going to mass that morning into an Italian church. We weren't going to understand any of the language, but I know the mass. I've been Catholic my whole life. I
Yeah.
understand what it is. So we're walking along this path, and it's decently early in the morning, and my buddy's like pointing out the flowers on the right, and I'm looking
Right.
on the left of this view, and we're looking at the cobblestone that we're walking on, and I mean the awareness and how in touch we were as we walked through this path that probably people stomp through, run through, sprint through every day without recognizing a single part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it had me thinking, how many times am I doing this at home? How many
Yep.
times do I stop and look at how many Europeans come to the States and they're in Virginia and they're driving through the Blue Ridge Mountains and they're like, oh my gosh, look at this view. Look how gorgeous this is. Or
That's
they're
right.
they're going into DC and they're looking at the Lincoln Memorial and they're standing in front of this presence of something so amazing, so simple,
Yep.
but it's a feeling of freedom. Like these are things that I think we always take for granted, but it's to your point, it's these little things that the more we focus on them in our initial environment, the more present we are, the better we're going to be. The better we're going to be in our relationships with our spouses, the better we're going to be with fatherhood and motherhood.
That's
It's
right.
all part of that equation. It's that presence is kind of setting back, paying attention a little bit more, and
Yep.
not just numbing yourself through life.
That's really well painted picture, Scott. I love it. I love this story and the example. And yeah, I think that's become a modern day X factor, and it's harder to do now because of all the disruptions and distractions that technology puts in, and the non disconnect between work and life. But if you can do that, and you have to work at that, you have to find real systems and probably even coaching and external support to do it effectively. You will notice that this is it. This is the hack. This is the hack to productivity, because this is how I find balance even when I'm very busy, right? This is how I stay more clear-headed and focused even when I'm very stressed and there's a big to-do list. To your point, this is how I make sure relationships, which is what gives us all the oxygen in the juice when they're going good, and when they're not, it's what zaps us. And it's how I find meaning and fulfillment, not because I'm waiting for a mountain in case, by the way, in case things don't go as long as we want, right? We've
Right.
maximized it. Like I'm big on that too. I'm big on just maximizing the moment, man, because I've had too many situations that once you start thinking like this, you notice it all, of the moments that were taken away from people that are busy planning, and then the life gets derailed. And again, what a bitch, right? If you've been working your whole life and you don't spend any time in your 20s, 30s, 40s enjoying those years, when you're at your healthiest, by the way, typically, when most people you love are typically around and still able to be with you, like, this is the golden years. This is what we tell everyone in our community. The moments of your 20s through your 50s are your golden years. It's not down the road. The best time yet. Make sure you treat it like that,
Yeah, it's powerful and true. I definitely, I've always been a visionary. I see things. It can be a great strength and it can be a challenge, because when you're looking so far in the future, I'm thinking very deep, very often.
Yeah.
And so, when I'm not traveling or seeing something new or having a new experience, or, it can be something where you feel like you're missing something. So being in that present state is also really important. So I do have to work at that. It's
Yeah.
not something that comes super easy for me. But it also is something that I can balance out. And, I do that with the routine. I do, a
Yeah.
similar routine every day that I'm home, and I try to, you ever want to know how quirky you are? Stay in a room with your son, your teenage son, who I stayed in a room with, and I started moving everything around in the room, and I was like, no, you can't put your suitcase here, man. You got to put it over here. And he's like, dude, what's wrong with you? And I said, listen, I spend a lot of days on the road, and I have to make this feel like it's part of home. So
Yeah.
I have a tendency, I get in, I open my shirts, I put them in the closet, I move the bag so it's out of the way. I don't know where I'm at. I don't want to trip over some bag that just
Yeah.
is laying in the middle of the floor because I don't even know the room. So that's unnecessary risk. And I'm doing all these things. He started laughing at me, and I said, well, I've learned that if I create the discipline in any environment, then I'm going to be more successful. I'm gonna sleep better. I'm gonna love being wherever my feet are. And so these are small things I do to make myself more functional and more present, because it's all a part of that. If I'm just going through and blurring through, throwing my stuff down, not paying attention to it, I'm actually not taking time to just adjust and reset. They say a dog, when you bring it into a new space, a dog gets comfortable by going around the perimeter and smelling and becoming familiar with everything in that space. And that's how they can sleep better. And that's why so many of us don't sleep good in the first night in a hotel room. We're on guard, or we're not protected. We don't know the environment. And so, it's funny, but your kids will point these things out. Your son's probably got a little ways to go before he starts pointing all these things out on you. But like for me, it's very evident, but I was good with it. I was like, here, you learn from it. Take what you want. Laugh about the rest. That's okay.
Right. That's right. Yeah, no, my son's already pointing out some of my stuff. He's smart enough to do that. They learn at an early age, all of our pros and our cons, our idiosyncrasies and quirks. So, but I'm confident he'll have a few less than I do, hopefully, or different ones at least.
They'll find them all. They will find them all. And if you're working on getting better, they're going to find what you need to work on. He was 3 years old. I brought him to the office my oldest one time. I'll never forget this. And the Cowboys were losing, or something was going wrong. And I was just screaming at the TV. I was like, what are you doing? Like, how are you make that pass? You can't make that pass. I mean, I'm going, and he looks at me and he's like, Dad, it is just a game, right?
Yeah.
And it's on the TV. And I remember going, oh man, yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Well, I mean, I never really got 100% healed from that, but I definitely got better and better. And to this day, he's the one that's getting fired up at the TV. Yeah. So, they do repeat those things, and but they can check you at good times, and it can help you recognize when you're too caught up in something that has no purpose or no. That's I still wanted them to win that game, so I don't know what happened, but I can't remember. It didn't matter. That's the point.
Yeah, no, kids are great trainers in their earlier years, the below 10-year mark of kind of, what it means to be a more actually joyful, happy person. And we think that's because it's childhood, but it's actually not. It's actually the way we're supposed to be, but we bury a lot of that, and we obviously transfer down a lot of that, whether directly or indirectly. And they start becoming, various forms of us, or develop mechanisms to deal with people like us. So that's the funny part. I watch him all the time, and he's my trainer. I mean, I want him to have a lot of what I see in him for a lot longer in life, right? That curiosity, that open-mindedness, just that judge-free mentality, because that's what I now train myself to unwind, and train executives to unwind. And so that they can have more joy, so they can be more productive, so they can have better relationships. We naturally had it all. we buried it all through a lot of automatic, subconscious, coping mechanisms. Very similar, like you said, it's like an addiction kind of journey you end up in. We all end up addicted to something in these psychologically soothing personality traits that we absorb. And those addictions are hard to break once you develop them,
we really are born just perfect. And then we just kind of start to tell ourselves a certain story, build a certain line, and follow it. And we spend a good chunk of our lives trying to get back to that innocence, that curiosity, and that value that childhood presented. Also working through some of the very challenges that childhood presented. So it is a unique thing. Adam, I want to be mindful of time today. What is the way that people can find you? How do we reach out if someone's interested in getting some executive coaching, working with you? They are a VP. and they're looking to have some support to build the better version of themselves, how do they find you? What's the next steps?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's pretty much the main social platform that I tend to interact on. So easily, accessible on LinkedIn personally. I'm on there every day. And then, our company, so I've kind of taken all my coaching focus into the build of this commercial leadership ecosystem that we call Crew. So we do offer group coaching stuff in there, but it's a great peer-to-peer support ecosystem for VP and above leaders. And we do a ton of stuff virtually. We do a lot of cool in-person events as well. So, anyone, there's a website, crewexec.com. Crewexec.com is the website for that. And of course, that's very active. Crew is very active on LinkedIn as well, and easy to inquire. And I actually typically personally still set up the exploration calls with people that are interested in exploring membership with us. Either myself or my co-founder, we love to still meet every single prospective member. So doors are open, and we're enrolling folks daily these days. So,
all right, well, we'll pop that stuff in the show notes. And Adam, it's been a joy to have you on the show, man. I love the conversation. Look forward to watching the business grow, your relationship with your father grow, and most importantly, maybe your son hopping in one day and being a part of the show.
Yeah, no, thanks, Scott, man. It was awesome. A great conversation. So could do it again. So let's stay in touch.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.